I'm here with Professor Shamsul from National University of Malaysia. Professor Shamsul is an anthropologist and has a long career as a public intellectual in Malaysia. He's also a member of the steering committee behind the setting up of Research Universities Malaysia program. And Professor Shamsul, what do you see as the major trends in development of higher education today?
Thank you. There are three important movements, I call it, in the way universities around the world have come to being in the last decade or so. Number one, there is a clear transformation of universities from an ivory tower to what I call an entreport. Entreport in sense, international port. Number two, because it is an international port, it is dealing with economic and commercial demand as a university, as opposed to ivory tower where idealism rules. So you have a tendency for being elitist much higher in the ivory tower context, and democratization process and openness in the entreport context. And because these are all still in a capitalist system, they're not in a socialist system, they're in a capitalist system, it was fulfilling the need of the different phases of economic development, from agricultural to production and now to knowledge economy. And therefore the university now has come to change to suit this new capitalist development, which is knowledge economy, so knowledge production. So therefore I see these are the three important movements to see how universities around the world are reacting to, or becoming part of, or adjusting themselves to.
And what is the situation in Malaysia? How are Malaysian universities reacting to this?
Well, I think when you talk about universities in developing countries, especially ex-colonies of European power, there's certain tradition that is inherited from the colonial power, because we had never had university in a modern sense, even though the first universities in the world were in Timbuktu and in some other countries which has no modern rule. So it is interesting how universities associated with colonialism. So we have inherited the British system in Malaysia, and therefore we inherited what CPs knows called the two cultures. The sciences and the arts are always divided and dichotomized. So despite of that structure, we are still able and willing to adjust ourselves to the demand of the market. So now the private university has become a very important contributor to higher education in Malaysia, which is usually carried by the public universities. There are 20 public universities now. There are more than 100 private universities, and the number of students between the two is almost equal. That means many Malaysians who can't go to the public university because competition is very tough, they have to go to private university, which also tough because they have to pay a lot more money to go there. Now the difference between the two, private and public, is that in the private university you go there to get a degree, and it is not a research university. I mean, academic staff are not encouraged to do research. There's no research funding. They have to combine effort with the public university, which has a lot more research funding. So there is a clear division of labor between a private university, which is more producing undergraduate degrees and professional degrees, as opposed to public universities, not only professional and undergraduate degrees, academic degrees, but also graduate degrees, masters and PhDs. So these are the interesting differences. Now, in the context of Malaysia, the introduction of knowledge economy, which is a global one, a global influence, has also influenced the way we organize our universities. And this is where you mentioned about the research university. We set up the research university. The idea to set it up was in 2003, and it came to fruition in 2007. And now we have about 7 years of running public universities, which are called research universities. So only 5 out of the 20 were selected based on the academic criteria and achievement. And they have every year a budget of more than, say, around 30 million euros extra compared to the other universities. So it is interesting that this university is emphasizing more on graduate studies and research and lesser on undergraduate.
So with this context of the knowledge economy and also the differentiation of this public university sector in Malaysia, creating these excellent 5, what happens to the national role of the university, to especially the role of the university in ensuring national social cohesion in Malaysia?
I think that is a very critical question for a country like Malaysia, because education is not simply for education. Education is to create not only general literacy but a form of political literacy to allow us to survive the challenge of multi-ethnicity, the challenge of multi-language existence, to challenge the multicultural. Here means many cultures, not multicultural in the Australian sense or in the Canadian sense. Multicultural means different cultures are being given importance because of their contribution to the country. So I think the most important part that you can see is how the university has to play 2 very important simultaneous roles. Number 1, university staff and whatever they do has to fulfill what I call the academic analysis. This is the basic academic job they have to do research, to prepare conferences and present their findings in conferences, to write papers, and then to publish them. And then these papers can also be used by students as references. And then how do you make public this knowledge? That comes to the second part, which is called public advocacy. So knowledge as knowledge by itself, I think, is a selfish account. So how do we make this knowledge accessible to the public is of great critical importance. And this is where I think the relationship between knowledge and beyond knowledge, what does it do to the country, nation building, as you raised it. So in a country like Malaysia, where diversity rules, they need to continuously communicate. They need to continuously deepen our understanding of one another, force upon research, public advocacy, and explanation of ourselves. We must agree to disagree, but what do we agree? What do we disagree? Have to be very clear. So I think to avoid exploitation by people who like violence, so we have examples at countries around Asia where violence rules. So I think this is where the social cohesion is one of the objectives of university education, is to provide that political literacy, to allow people to understand that they have, through rationality and scientific knowledge, to survive, not about emotion, about how important is my language, how important is my religion. I think to mitigate that situation, we have to have this conscious effort to create this social cohesion. And I think this is what we're trying to do with universities. And knowledge economy is interesting for me because it can be a two-sided impact. It can be positive, it can be negative. In a country struggling to establish social cohesion, the existence of internet and social media may not necessarily be very good, because it becomes a part of anti-establishment, and in fact a lot of lying and false knowledge has been information put in for the public consumption. So there is this contradiction with the existence of knowledge economy in a country like Malaysia, where we cherish very much some form of social cohesion rather than disunity or simply disagreement.
And there is foreign universities operating in Malaysia, and also some universities around the world seem to be establishing themselves more as global institutions. Then for those universities, what happened to that double role of working for the public good and working for the research excellence?
Well, I think what we forget about globalization is a very important concept called embedding or embeddedness. You come from, say for example, from a developed country, you come to a tribal country where there are tribalism exists, people still fight on horsebacks. You have to change the script and you have to change the set. So the set and the script is what exists in that country. It's called embedding. So even global education is global only in terminology, but when it comes to practice, it has to be embedded in the legal system, in the language of the local, and also in the knowledge culture of the population where it is. So I think in the context of Malaysia, foreign universities, which for me are no different than foreign investors building factories in a country, whether Coca-Cola, whether they are building, they are producing microchips, they come to make money through knowledge as a commodity. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They are selling knowledge. So for them, the bottom line is profit. Anything else that benefit the society is called CSR. So for me, I don't take them very seriously in contributing the national agenda. I think their own national agenda from where they come, and also their profit motivation agenda is very, very high, and I can understand that because they have to close down if it doesn't make money. And this is very clear during the economic recession in the 1997-98. Many of them packed their bags and go, and then later they came back. So that proved to me that national agenda is not in their agenda. So, but they are good in a sense that provide alternative to local students to get their education when they cannot get into the public university.
And Professor Shamsul, are you an optimist on behalf of universities going forward? Do you see universities as being part of the promise that we need to provide for the younger generations?
Well, for me, it's not only university, it's also multiversity. We are developing this concept in Malaysia where university seems to be very limited in its ability to as an instrument for knowledge is very limited. We follow a particular Greek understanding of notion of science, notion of knowledge. But when we begin to see the success of Islamic banking, Islamic economics, you begin to see there are other ways of looking at this world and operating. And now, why do everybody jumping into Islamic economics? Because there's money to be made. So there is an alternative way other than university. It's called multiversity, which includes many understanding and notion of idea of university, because the present idea of university is basically developed very well in the Western context, probably from the church. After all, if you see people who are graduating, what do they put on? The dress is a bit like a Christian ceremony. If you remember the wedding of Prince Charles to Princess Diana, they're all wearing the same hat, they're wearing the same dress. So there's a lot of Western Christianity in the present modern understanding of idea of university. So that's why in Malaysia, we believe that we inherited that too, but I think we can also expand this idea to include alternative ways of looking at providing the content for university or multiversity.
When you look around in higher education sector, globally or in Malaysia, what are some of the exciting new things that are going on, or the exciting developments at this time?
Well, I think the most important contribution that the new knowledge-based university has is how they get along with the private sector, not the public, with the private sector. We always worry about private sector because we want their money to help us, we want them to pay for our research. So, unfortunately, it is the private sector which may be not really interested in the nation, but in making money. Say, for example, if you can produce a particular cure for headaches, tomorrow you become a billionaire. So you produce a good, excellent medicine for dengue fever, tomorrow you become super millionaire. So there's no public, there's no human, ordinary people inside it. And this is where I worry about this relationship. But they can produce good stuff, excellent stuff. But where is the people? Now that is my question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Professor Shamsul. That's a good question to end with, and also a very exciting conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome.